Hello, hello, hello. Welcome to another episode of Juni's Café, a series where we learn, share, and grow by putting our thoughts into a piece of paper, folding it up, turning it into a paper airplane, and letting them fly. I'm your host, Juni, and before we begin, I just want to say thank you so much to everyone who's been listening, supporting the series, leaving your comments, even though it's a really small community. Just the fact that you've been taking the time to listen and just going with me on this journey, it really does mean a lot. With me today, I have someone who I've been really meaning to collab with. It's Mir Olivares Bonilla. Thank you so much for coming, Mir. How are you today?
Hello. I'm great. Thank you for asking. I'm very glad to be here with you today. I've been so long wanting to talk to you, having some chat, things that matter to us.
Yes.
But yeah, I'm feeling really glad being here.
Yeah, I actually, because I remember that my mom actually told me about you because you're friends with my mom, and she was telling me, was like, oh, you should talk to Mir because there's lots of similar experiences, and I was like, oh yeah, I'm pretty sure that we can definitely be able to relate to a lot of different things that I may not be able to relate to, people who aren't non-binary, which, by the way, for people who don't, I mean, I'm pretty sure that I I've said it multiple times, but I identify as within the non-binary, non you know I identify somewhere as non-binary. Do you specifically identify as non-binary, or is there a different label that you feel fits better?
No, I think in the last times, non-binary fits well for me. I feel it more encompass my fluidity. I always been very fluid. But I think non-binary and queer are those I sometimes use it interchangeable. Um, but non-binary is more encompasses of what my gender identity feels like.
Yeah, I think for me it's a very similar case. I primarily use either non-binary or queer. I like using queer more often, mostly because it's more vague. It encompasses both my sexuality and my gender, so I can just say I'm queer and that's it. I don't, if I say I'm
Right.
non-binary, that's kind of like a partial aspect of it, but I do think that they go hand in hand for me. Um,
Right.
I also wanted to speak to you because I do know that I believe it was time is a concept to me right now, so I don't remember when it happened. But
Yeah,
you
we
were
have mess up.
yeah, but I remember that you were part of the Women's March, and that you were
Right.
part of a demonstration for it was called un violador en tu camino. Translated to English, that would be a rapist in your way, a rapist in your path.
Mm-hmm.
I Something like that.
Yeah, something similar.
Yeah. How was that experience and being a part of that demonstration?
um, yes, actually, I'm very glad that I participated. Is very well that particular demonstration. I may assure in other times and in different moments, but I think there was a social movement already around the world, um, pushing around as a feminist movement with all this violence, sexual violence, and social difference, and microaggressions, and all patriarchy and all these things happening. Um, but it was until this movement in Chile and this performance that they enacted, right? Un violador en tu camino, or a rapist in your way, that it can encompass with music and with art, and but with a social message about what we really are passing a lot of people, because yeah, all this um, patriarchy and sexism and violence, and we are not exempt of that. We are part of that violence that we receive, even more, because like we are kind of in the marginalized, right, in the marginalized group. So it was kind of very, how do I say this, it was very warming, very it feels like it was a solidarity
Mm.
in terms of this group of people turning together to this same matter. And when we were together, we're like just to for people understand. So we march in the Houston Women's March, and we did this performance, Violador en tu Camino, in front of in the in the public. How do you say that?
How do you say it in Spanish? I can translate it.
En la plaza, al frente de la alcaldía.
Oh, the damn, I don't know how to translate it. The plaza in front of the mayor's, was it the
Yeah, the
the
mayors.
mayor's place? Yeah, so it was like a
Yeah,
government building, right? Okay.
right. In
Yeah.
front of the mayor building.
Hmm.
So and we came from different countries, different backgrounds. So it was very uplifting to see from different voices from different countries, like how we all came together to, yeah, to take out this message. At the beginning, and as I said, it was kind of a very compassionate, encompassing. That's a way to say it.
Yeah, encompassing. Yes,
Yeah,
it's a good.
encompassing.
I think that that's a great way to
Feeling,
describe it.
right? Yes, because it came all together. Not only because they were my friends, most of them, but there's most of them I get to knew just there, or maybe in the preparation. So it was like a recognition that there's a lot of people that we all need, especially in the Latinx community in Houston, that we have like this many cases of sexual violence and also traffic. Like there was no space for a Latinx community or Spanish speakers to talk about this aspect of, to talk about the issues that matter to them and or the problematics. So I think that was like the beginning. And then in the process, I was also defining, like trying to get in peace with myself, right, with my process of gender. I always knew I was very fluid, but it was kind of in between, like that I was also having this process. So it was like, yeah, I am occupying space or I'm not occupying space. So that was something that I dealt a lot, because people think like feminism or the feminist movement, like women are at the center, right? And that's I think a lot of that, right? I think that women are the center, and I learn a lot in my process, in my life in general. And I think but also we are part of that process. We came from our sister, our mothers, like our people that surround us also help us understand these problematics. They are the trans community, the trans femme community, also trans women, also help us lead to this moment to understand better like these differences in social inequalities. um, I don't know if that's a way that you were thinking too.
No, yeah, that's actually something that I've been thinking about a lot too, as to how I personally, um, like, feel surrounding the feminist community. Since, you know, I identify as non-binary, but I grew up just an enigmatic male at birth. So when my mom would have like these like gatherings and events with you know like for feminist movements like at home, like I would listen and always be willing to like learn, and I still feel that way. Like it's about listening and like letting
Okay.
letting those spaces be for those people who need to speak, and just be willing to listen. But as someone who's non-binary, it's like, is there like a space for me? Is my voice just like where would my voice fit there? Is that something that even wants to be heard? I feel like, do queer voices want to even be heard in the feminist movement? Because sometimes I truly feel like they don't. Like, it's like I see a lot of white feminism in the media
Right.
and in a lot of movements, and it's like I I I identify as a feminist 100%. I'm not saying I don't. I just don't know if like the feminist movement is truly trying to do something for people who aren't a certain, like, don't look a certain way or don't fit into a certain type of
Right, other
box,
identities.
which is, yes, which is why I think overall I have identified a little bit more with, I found more of a home within the queer community. But even then, that still has like racial problems. I feel like there is a lot of
Mm.
racism within the queer community and stuff like that. But overall, because a lot of my friends are queer, most of my friends are queer, so it's been easier uh, to like find something that feels comfortable there. But of course, that's like my personal experience, and I think it's definitely like a case by case basis as to like how that would fit in. Um, did
And
you?
definitely like,
Uh, oh, go ahead. Sorry.
oh yes, like I definitely like, I totally shadow what you're saying. Like I totally battle at some time, and I something that I discussed with your mom as well, and in general with the our group, um, con la colectiva feminista colibrí, as
Mm-hmm.
where was my point, or where was my voice, where like if I needed to leave out space for them, because I feel like, yeah, like that space where I was not longing, feeling like I had a space there, or because maybe I need to make space for them, that they need to share those things. But at the same time, it's like, wait a minute, like yes, we all are in the same, like the point of feminism, but also trans feminism means like we all these voices came together, right? And I think it has been changing. We still have a lot to work on, because and we cannot talk about feminism in just one way, because there's a multiple feminism, right? And the
Mm-hmm.
one that I really believe is the one that is um, intersectional. Those like
Yes.
this is a like concept that it was concept by Kimberly Crenshaw. It was a academic, like African American academic, but also there's have been like also from the Caribbean. There's been this, or from different parts of the world. There's been also this push for being more inclusive, not just in terms of like your sex sign of birth, but also about gender identities in general, race, ethnicities, or religions. So it's not just like women because we are women, or the female because they've been assigned sex at birth. but also to integrate other parts like trans women, trans lives, trans folks, um, black folks, Asian, like all this diversity that we all needed to be more encompassing of what we are really living. So that's the feminism that
Mm-hmm.
I really I trust in and I believe in, is the one that is a trans feminist, that um, is inclusive, is intersectional, is also, yeah, non-patriarchal, and not, how do you say, not colonial, not colonialist. So that's also a part that came
Yeah,
into the
I
to the
I've been talking
conversation.
a lot. Yeah, I've been talking a lot about colonialism with my friends and about how much pain like we feel and we have, like, and it's like generational, like not
Right.
just, it's like super generational, like pain that like we feel due to colonialism. And it's like something that's mostly felt like within people of color, because like, you can't talk about colonialist trauma to like a white person and expect them to get it, because they're not gonna
Yeah, we have
understand.
it embodied already in our system.
Hmm. So, like, when we talk about, when we talk about movements, and like actions that are taken, we have to take all of those things into account, and also keep in mind that how we move forward for one person, or like for one specific person, may not be the same way that we need to move forward for another type of person. Like, for example, we always talk about like the wage gap. I think this is a very common example where, like a white woman gets paid less than a white man, but like, a black woman gets paid even less. That's something that needs to be addressed. And then something that also gets, brought up by like quote unquote men's right activists, which, like, that's like a whole other like can of worms, which like
Right.
I'm just like, okay, it's like, oh well, if, what about men's rights? Like, what about, the rights for me to like get my child, or why is it always the woman that gets the child? It's like, yeah, that's a valid issue. I'm not arguing that you should have the ability to get your child if you're the better fit parent. I'm not saying that's wrong. You're trying to make an argument for something that I am also fighting for. I'm not saying that the woman should automatically get the child. I'm just saying that they should, like, both the mother and the father should
Equal
equally
opportunity.
be treated as candidates. And if the mother is not fit, then of course the father should have the child. That is part of feminism. And a lot of people who are against the feminist movement just automatically think that it's, oh, women are automatically better than men, or whatever the heck. But it's not just that. It's,
Yeah.
we're trying to create a just society that includes, or at least, like, the way that I believe in feminism, the way that I believe in moving society forward, is to not just put the like equal footing between, men and women, but also equal footing for anyone that identifies as any gender, regardless of ethnic background, so that it's like a truly just world. And it's, when I describe it like that, it's like, that sounds like a fantasy, but it's something that deserves to be worked towards too. It's like, it's it is something that, we should continue to strive for.
I'm glad you're bringing it up because I think there is a lot of misconception as well as what feminism is and what looks like, right? And yeah, people when they mention it, especially uh, people assign male at birth, like they recognize just like these two opposite signs, like oh, it's or it's just a female, or it's just a like the women, right? And that's definitely the point. Like at the beginning, I think there was this uh, this opportunity, or there was a try to include more the women, right, in the political area. And and show like, hey, we also are part of this society, we deserve the same opportunities. um, but also in the recent years we have been seeing like, I think there has been an openness to see the gender expressions, right, and gender identities as a wide openness. Like we are pushing out those borders,
Mm-hmm.
to demonstrate like this is not just about binaries. This is more, yeah, more wide than we are just thinking, and we have been instructing or we have been educating ourselves. And I think that's a process. Like it doesn't came from day to night, like from one day to another. I think it takes a lot of time, but I think slowly we are arriving to that point to recognize that, yeah, so there's another identities, and we are trying to build that path for everyone, then not just like, yeah, certain people, right? Because you have some privilege, some others. If not for everyone, regardless of their gender identity, sex orientation, ethnicity, that they can have the same, yeah, the same, how do you say, legal, in all aspects, like legal, but also in the society as well, like access to work, access to healthcare, access to housing, right? All these things that are very concerning for a lot of trans folk and gender non-binary. And yeah, I think feminism fights a lot for that too.
Yeah. Something that I've also been thinking about um, recently is like in a situation, because I do believe that, at least in my case, gender is fluid and it's valid if it's fluid, regardless if I feel or identify as one way for 2 days and then after those 2 days I feel completely different. I think that's valid. But my thing is,
Mm-hmm.
right, uh, let's say that let's say that next week I feel like I identify as a woman, right? That would be valid. That's how I identify. Would then feminism, like, would that be something that would identify for me? Or let's say that, and then after, let's say afterwards I no longer identify that, is that something that would no longer like apply? Or would feminism no longer, like, I think I've just been thinking about like how feminism like responds to people who are gender fluid or non-binary, because I do know that something that I've been seeing a lot, especially within the younger generation, is a fight for trans women, which I love, and I
Mm-hmm.
definitely think
Mm-hmm.
there needs to be more of that,
Yes, yes, yes.
um, especially with the incredible large amounts of like hate crimes that have been, you know if we talk about Alexa in Puerto Rico,
Mm-hmm.
and
Oh,
the actions that happened with that, and the countless amounts of trans youth that commit suicide in the United States. Um, they have the highest numbers in terms of suicide rates. I believe it's like trans youth, um,
mm-hmm.
and it's like, uh, whenever I talk about feminism, I need to talk about queerness. And I think sometimes whenever I
Right.
have conversations, because like it's not like it's an option for me, it's not like I can just talk about feminism because I also have to talk about queerness because that's just my life. It's like if I were to ask my friend, and she's black, um and she's black and she's also queer, right? And she if I would ask her about um uh how what it is to be a feminist, you would have to talk about being a black queer youth, um, navigating um, the feminist circles. For me, it's like, yeah, I'm queer, I'm Hispanic, I I wasn't born in the United States. I was born in Puerto Rico, which that's like part of this part of the United States, whatever. But like I came here at 14 to Texas, and lots of culture shock. So there's like there's so many layers that needs to be addressed in terms of what feminism means to me, but that doesn't necessarily mean that like I'm not a feminist. It just means that what how I speak about it is going to be different, because for if I were to ask like one of my white friends, which over time the amount of white people that want to be friends with me is less and less, because they they don't want to listen, but it just makes the ones that I am friends with, like I do appreciate it because they really do listen. But I'm just speaking about a specific situation, about this one girl, but whatever. It's like the way that they talk about their feminism is you can tell that it's very specifically white feminism, and it kind of does make me a little sad, because I'll tell them, oh yeah, that's very valid and super understandable, and we should fight for that. Um, but I can't really fight for that yet, because I just need, like, I can't fight for what you want to fight, because I need to fight just to get where you are, and then I can fight to what you want to fight for. So like, you're at number 2 and I'm at number 3. You want to get to number 1, but I want to get to number 2. So like, your goal is great, but I need to catch up to you first.
Right. I think that's one of the things that tackles feminism, or the one that I believe, right?
Mm-hmm.
But also, it doesn't matter like your class, your economic status, right? Or your we also have to be aware of our privilege. How it looks like that, like it depends in each person, and yeah, it will be different from each person. Like I will not talk about feminism like a same like you were mentioning, like a black woman here in the South, because my experiences of life are very different, because as you as well, I grew up for all of my life in Puerto Rico, and it's a colonial status, like in colonial life, like, yeah. So my experience, like, how do I perceive or talk about feminism, it would not be the same as someone here or younger than me or older than me. Like, it's very unique to each person. So I speak to what resonates with me, and you will speak to what resonates to you. As you were talking, I cannot talk to you like, I first need to get to that space. And I think feminism try to erase a little bit of that gap of privilege, right? Like everyone, independent of if you are have more class or not, we all deserve the same, and we have to talk about this, about our privilege, our understanding, and how our life that we're living, how we can also make space for others that not necessarily have those same abilities or tools. So we have to talk out a little bit of that too.
How so question regarding your non-binary identity. Do you how long ago or how long have you identified as non-binary?
That's a good question. I think there's no like one, like a specific day, right? Like I say, like the 3rd of June of 2000, like
Yeah.
it's a specific moment, right? At that time, at 9:30 a.m., I just wake up, like, but like people like try to or feel like it's like that, like one moment.
It's just like you just wake up and you're like, you know what? I'm just gonna decide
like
to
I'm gonna be
like
like
this.
right. I'm gonna be, and no, I think it's a long process. Since childhood, I've been, like I mentioned, like I've been very fluid in terms of like sexual orientation, sexual identity, expression, in all terms, right? I have
Mm-hmm.
been that talking about privilege, right? I see like a privilege, like I have been or have that space to explore who I am and accepted in my family and the people around me. So I have that privilege to know, okay, this is what I really like, and this is what I really looks like I am. So I was confronting a lot lately in this right experimentation of fluidity with masculinity or in the between. I always felt like I didn't have like a preference. Like I really like one day like I could be in one moment I'm very feminine and at the same time and can be masculine. And I love both. Like and sometimes I don't like neither. Like and that actually I was living in in another part. I was living one time in Italy and under the people like around like the expression of people usually when you look like kind of like how do you say quote unquote androgynous, so like this
Mm-hmm.
expression of people like they don't know like what they're referring to, so they start to kind of make questions or be very curious like about. So I recognize that that sense it was very enjoyable for me. Like I love that part. Like they don't recognize if it's a girl, if it's a boy. Like I love that. So it was for me like, huh,
Same.
I love this sense, right? And I started exploring more around that, and yeah, I feel like not necessarily because the androgynous part, because I have been like with different expressions, but that term of me feeling like I don't have to decide from one way or another. Like there's an it opens to this possibility to, yeah, to explore, to be really like authentic and not be forced to do something or I don't know, something that I don't want to do or something that I don't want to be, just to fill this box, because like that
Yeah.
doesn't necessarily feels like me. So yeah, it was kind of a battling experience to see if do I really feel like a woman? Do I really feel like right like because this expectation of me because I was assigned female at birth, right? And I was like, no, not quite. Like I when I started like when people were referring as women or women, like I quite not feel like they were talking to me. So that was when I
Mm.
started like recognizing like okay, maybe yeah, maybe that's not that's not me. And also with this, I'm glad that you mentioned about the women's march, because it was kind of that point like okay, I was like okay, definitely like this is not me. Like i'm 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 not binary, I'm queer, I'm this other thing, but yeah, I'm not a woman.
Yeah. I remember for me, like in terms of me discovering my gender identity, which it feels like it took a long time, but considering that it's like a personal thing, it doesn't really matter how long it takes or how fast it's done. Like,
uh,
um, but looking back, I remember the first memory I have of identifying with gender was when I was like a child, and I remember that I actually felt more in line or identified with like as a girl than as a boy, and I was like, yeah, this is I kind of feel more um like I identify as a girl at this point, and I was like very young. And then as I grew into like my tweens and like my teens, I started identifying more like I identified more as a boy at that time, and then it would kind of like kept going like back and forth, and sometimes it was like in between, and sometimes it was like neither. and I was like, I don't really know what's going on. And then I was also just struggling with my sexuality at the time, so I was like, I can't focus on both, so I'm just gonna put like a pin on my gender so that I can focus on my sexuality and figure that out. But I realized that the reason why I couldn't figure out my sexuality is because I was ignoring my gender identity, and I couldn't just look at it from one. I couldn't just look at one thing without looking at the other. I needed to look inside and look at the whole picture. And then when I was able to look at the whole picture, I was like, it's not that I like this and I feel this way because I identify as this. It's just that I'm queer and that's it. Like I'm me and that's all that matters. I like some people and I don't like some other people, and I feel this way sometimes and I feel this other way some other times. And when I kind of just like let go of all of these, like trying to like fill certain boxes or trying to fill certain checks or trying to, you know, do whatever, it was like, yeah, I can just vibe. I can just like who I want and not like who I don't. And that's all that matters. And then it kind
No,
of felt
that vibe.
really liberating. Yeah. So that in and of itself felt liberating because I didn't have to, you know, and then I publicly came out to my family and to my friends, and I got overall pretty good responses. Although some people did think that I was coming out as trans, which valid. I'm not like offended by that. Because I do know some people within the non-binary community, like do also identify as trans, because it's like a trans umbrella, and there's like binary, like trans men and trans women, and there's non-binary. I personally don't feel like I identify as trans. I do know that like I am within like the gender non-conforming community. I just don't know if I can use the trans label for myself because I just don't really feel comfortable with that aspect for personally. Um, but
I totally feel
if
the
you're
same.
non-binary, yeah, if you're non-binary and you use the trans label, that's perfectly awesome. And if you want to transition, you can, because some people will transition, but just because they transition, that doesn't necessarily mean that they identify as a specific gender. Because I think some people will assume it's like, oh, you want to have this genitalia because you identify with this gender. But no, I want it, like, if they want, like, they want to have that genitalia because they want to have, because that's what they want their body to look like, because that's what it would make them feel euphoric, you know, it would make them feel great. um, that doesn't equate to whatever gender binary you have in your head. And I think once we let go of genitalia equals gender, once we let go of that, like it's gonna just open up the possibility and open up like so many, but like so much potential for gender and sexual liberation, in my opinion.
No, I totally second you. Like, I definitely, as myself, as my case, I didn't, I don't feel like like trans. I know that as same as you. Like, I'm in the non-conforming side, but yeah, transgender doesn't fit with me. But I try to
Mhm.
recognize like every people, like every person, is their process is different, and their sometimes they want people want to transition, some other people not, and that's totally valid. um, we recognize like, yeah, gender and sexuality is very wide and very fluid, so there's not contract to that. um, I was going to make a point about that and I totally forget, so continue.
No, you're fine. Something that I also wanted to bring up that I almost forgot about, because I did want to talk about some misconceptions and um, things that people don't truly understand about the non-binary community or like the trans community as a whole. and I think that's one of the things, that I, brought up was, oh, like, the, genitalia equals gender, when it's not really the case. And there's also a lot of things that people will say that, um, a lot of people will say that they think it's not transphobic, but it is. Like, and they, and it's not like I'm mad at them. It's not like I'm like, oh, you're transphobic because you're doing this. It's like you're you don't know better. I'm not mad at
No.
you, but just here's why I don't like the thing you said. All I'm gonna ask of you is to listen and to be better in the future. But I'm not like mad at these people for doing these things. Like, I just don't think that they're contributing a good, like a good message. For example, like some things like, oh, um, like talking about someone's genitalia, or like, like, or asking about, honestly, anytime someone asks about someone's
A
genitalia, it's
big
just like really
no.
uncomfortable to me. It's like, why are you asking about, like, I honestly, like, if I'm not gonna be sleeping with you, like, why? I really
Like,
don't, you don't need
right?
to ask me
Yeah, that's
about
very
anything.
disrespectful in general.
Yeah, like, you wouldn't, because the thing is, you wouldn't ask a cisgender person about their genitalia. Like, that's like, it's only trans people and gender nonconforming individuals. Like, those are the only people who ever get asked that question. Because if you go up to a cis person, like, it's not even a thing that happens. I can't imagine it actually happening to a cis person, um, because that's just, they get that privilege. Or, for example, saying stuff like, um calling someone by their dead name, um is, and if someone doesn't know what a dead name is, a dead name is the birth name that's like on their original birth certificate. Most people call it their dead name because it's no longer used. And some people are comfortable sharing what their dead name is, um, and some people aren't. But it's like up to that person to share or disclose that information. And if you ask them what that is, I don't feel like it's your place to like insist on it if they choose to not say anything, you know. But I feel like there's like two examples, a few examples of some things that I can think of that on the surface may not seem like that problematic, but it really is. It's hurtful to, you know to trans people.
Yeah, sometimes I have a lot of that, especially right in general, right? Like in the social
Mm-hmm.
space, workplace, any place. For me, the part that it came kind of uncomfortable is the part like when you do it like intentionally, because I can accept
Mm-hmm.
if you don't know, like you don't know like what you don't know, right? And if you don't know this, like this recognition of okay, I didn't know, I'm sorry, like I will, but I will teach myself, like I will find myself the resources, I will like find a way to be better. Like I don't have to do it, but you can do it by yourself. But if you do it like intentionally, like you know already, like okay, this is the name that this person go by, or you know already their pronouns, or you know already their information on how they identify themselves, and you insist in doing otherwise, like how do you perceive them, then that's a problem for me. Like that's the point, like I have to say okay, we have to stop and reconfigure this. Like we all deserve to be treated like, I will not tell you like, I don't know, if a person is named Pablo, I will not call you otherwise because your name is Pablo. I will not call you otherwise, right? And like
Yeah,
it's
I
kind
think
of a sense of, yeah, go on.
No, I think no, you're absolutely right. I feel like for me, it's like a sense of entitlement. You know,
Right.
like you're not entitled to any information besides the information that I give you about myself. Um,
But for
and
me, it's also like kind of disrespectful because it's kind of with you still trying to say like, oh, that doesn't matter. Like for you, it's like, oh, another name. Like you are not respecting that person, not just because the name that they choose, but also their identity, their person as their being, like as their true authentic self. So yeah, it comes also in terms of respect.
hmm,
That's my point.
another another thing um that's common. Another thing that is like a very common misconception is uh uh the term, and this one I have lots of thoughts on because it's uh but the terms transvestite or transsexual, um
Hmm.
because I personally don't feel comfortable using it for myself, but I do know, and for the most part, most people nowadays don't feel comfortable using that term for themselves, right? That was a very common term that many people used before, and that's perfectly fine. If someone tells you I identify as a transvestite or as a transsexual, you don't get to say that they can't use that term. You know, if if they want to use that term, even if you think it's outdated, that's their choice to use that term, right? But if you're not part of the community, or if you don't identify as someone who is queer, you can't. I don't know. I feel like don't call them that unless they've explicitly stated otherwise.
Mention.
Because again, it is an older term. Um, like for example, I believe I think it was like around the 80s. Like it was around the 80s or the 70s or something like that. It was a yeah, around that time. Like those the term transvestite was more commonly used, and you know it from like songs like that sweet transvestite, for example. Like people, like songs were written about it. Um, it wasn't Many people weren't called drag queens. They were called either just queens or transvestites, and it was perfectly fine, but not anymore. Um, and I think it's more of a sorry. Uh, oh no, I was just saying that it was like a thing that evolves with time. But that was it.
Yeah. So no, my point was that people was using it interchangeably, like travesty and transsexual, and I
Mm,
think that's when it came to like also like kind of two styles, like kind of definitions in general to because people equate um, people use as a performer, no, to show or to dress up as another gender, thinking like, oh, it's because this person is gay or this person is transsexual, when sometimes it was just a performance. So that's why it became to, I don't know, in terms of the differentiation between transvestites and transsexual. But in the late years, there has been this changing, like it was kind of denigratory to talk about being transsexual, being transvestite, and that's why it became like transgender a better word to encompass
mm-hmm.
this gender or gender identities or expressions.
Yeah. No, exactly. I think that's exactly exactly correct. Well, again, it. I'm not like a professor who's like, oh, that's correct, but I agree. Um, I think for many terms, it's like this is what was used by then with the knowledge and the feelings that were and the sentiments that were held at that time. And as the community has grown and evolved, this is why we now prefer to use these terms. And I think a we saw another version similar to this with the term queer, where people used it, then they stopped using it, and now they're using it again. And I identify as queer, and I see many people, it's usually younger people, uh, who they're like, you shouldn't use queer because it's a slur, and it's like, I if you don't want to use it, you don't have to use it. I'm not gonna stop using it. That's my business. I'm gonna continue to use queer. I am proudly queer. If you don't have to say it out of your mouth, but if you call me anything else, like, I just don't like. If you're gonna call me something, you're gonna call me queer. So if you don't want to call me queer, then don't call me. And like, that's because calling me anything else would just be inaccurate and disrespectful to me. um but again, like, if they don't feel comfortable using that term, then I guess they don't feel comfortable referring to me as a queer individual,
I
in,
think
in
I
my
have,
opinion.
yes, I have heard a lot, yeah, from younger folks. I don't know if this is because this is what the information right in the outer space are like in these times. In some time there was used, the term was used like to derogatory, to use as a, right, as this abnormal, to a, like equivalent to abnormal. But
Mm-hmm.
now queer is something different, like the theories and the social movement and feminist movement and queer movements start to encompass that and appropriate that term to,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, to appropriate that, to put themselves as this is our new identity. And that's why what we want to be out of that space. We want to especially be the different. We want that, we want get out of the social norms, and if that means being queer, that's what we are. And we are here, we're proud. And I love that about the term queer, because it encompasses like this umbrella and this opportunity, like, yes, we are the different, like we are the thing, like is like we are not encompassed to a box. We are trying to get out of that form, get out of the boundaries, get out of the borders, and yeah, explore those those places.
Ugh, I I love that. I think that was a really beautiful description of what it means to be queer. Um, so really quick, because um, we're getting near the end. So I did want to ask before we wrap up, did you have anything that you wanted to promote, share, or like your social media projects, anything that you're working on?
Not specifically. I think, well, I have two things, like my daily work. I work as a sexual health educator. So I really, really believe in the importance of we all getting access to sexual health education. I think it's very important, not just for us as an adults, but young people. Like young people deserve to have this information and really understand what really gender identity, what gender identities, what sexual orientation, what, um, and not just in binary ways, right? They can feel like they are welcome, that they are accepted as they are, and that also like
Mm-hmm.
help them in their life. So I'm very into it, especially Latinx communities and Latinx young folks. I think they have an advantage from us, or from my generation. Like I'm in the late 20s, but I think like the teens now, they have a lot of openness and this eagerness to really find like new ways to relationate each other. in ways that are better, I don't know to say, healing ways. But I want to believe that. I want to believe like we are moving to a more uh, restorative and healing era where we can
No,
all feel
yeah.
like we are different, but that they're good different. Like I can accept you, I can accept our differences, always that it doesn't interfere with our dignity, with who we are, right?
I
And the
definitely
other
feel like
thing will be, yeah, go ahead.
oh, sorry. I just was gonna echo your sentiment. I definitely feel like this new like the Gen Z generation, which de- technically I guess I'm a Gen Z, right? But whatever. Um, is the younger generation continues to like be breaking barriers, in terms of um like sexuality and gender. And when I see like my younger cousin, for example, um, who is like very openly, queer, and I'm like, oh my goodness, when I was
Right.
her age, I could never.
I
So
and the same,
stuff like
like I think I was a late bloomer, like to this aspect, right? And unless like, even if I was very educated since very young, I didn't like bloom until I was already in the university. So I was like, yeah, like experiences all this life. But I recognize and see now younger people since younger time, like younger folks, like you say, queer young folks. And yeah, it gets a lot of me of emotion. Like I wish I could be that, like in that moment. But yeah, each person's process is different, right? So
mhm.
yeah, I'm very glad and routing very much for this new generation and new young folks. I really believe in young folks. Like they have a lot to say, they have a lot of belief, they have a lot to learn us, like teach us about how we can do things better, right? Oh, and the last thing is just like, I'm also a writer, so
Mhm.
so I think that encompasses also who I am. Like I wanted to, specifically a poet. Like I feel like very into it. Like poetry is the language that I can speak fluently, or feel like
Mhm.
it speaks my soul, like who I am. And so I'm trying to write a little bit about this in my poetry. Like how does it feel like to be non-binary, or how that feels for me in the outside world, right? And I think that was very healing, and I think that could be very healing as well for other young folks or for other folks to take that time to write, either, or using arts is very, it's a very powerful tool. So either by writing or by paint or music, use those two, or whatever it is. It doesn't have to be art, but use that tool, and yeah, to express their voice. I'm doing with poetry, and hopefully, cross fingers, I get it published sometime soon.
Yes.
But yeah, do take that you think you're passionate about, or tool, like to explore, manifest what you're feeling, what are your thoughts, what are your voice, and how that could express better your authentic self. So do that and put your heart into it. That was my point.
That was beautiful. I think that was a very well put, and a beautiful way to end this. So thank you so much if you listened to this all the way through. If you like this podcast, please feel free to like, share, and subscribe, and turn on the notification bell so that you can be notified when I upload new content. That's the number one way for you to support this content. And of course, uh, I hope you have a very lovely day and just stay safe. I love you all. Bye bye.